and welcome back to the Better Advertising with Better Media podcast. Today, I am incredibly excited to have one of my favorite people, one of my good friends, I would say, in the space, Alex Juday, on the podcast. Alex, hello, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. It's great to be here. It's been a long time. I feel like we're overdue for an appearance on your podcast.
It is. We haven't even done general content in forever, I feel like, which is not a good thing. I mean, two of the greatest minds in the space on a podcast drinking coffee. What could go wrong?
Right?
Well, today I'm really excited because there's been two big buzzwords I feel like in the space lately. It's AMC and incrementality and measurement. And I have one of the best people here to talk about incrementality. So before getting into your background, I want to keep that as a little secret for people. What is incrementality and why is everyone talking about it?
Sure. So incrementality is not a new concept by any of the imagination. And it's been around for as long as businesses like our clients have been doing business. And in reality, incrementality is rather simple. It is one of two things. Did I create a dollar that I didn't have before? Meaning, let's pretend I'm tied. Did I capture a consumer who was net new to the category? There's not that many people not washing their clothes in America, so that doesn't happen too often. Or did I capture a competitive brand shopper that's new to mine? And then secondly, and a lot of people in platforms especially, and that's why I don't love the kind of over reliance and over focus on new to brand only is the only way to drive meaningful growth, is did I make a dollar I do have today more valuable? And there can be a lot of incrementality within that second piece. And so if you're tied, there's real tangible top line and bottom line incrementality when you get a consumer to move from, say, a Tide liquid SKU into a Tide unit dose SKU. Their unit economics are very favorable, both top and bottom line. And so that's what incrementality is. Did I create a dollar I didn't have before, or did I make a dollar I do have more valuable?
Which is a hot topic lately, I would say, due to the growth of retail media budgets at
Yeah.
the end of the day. You know, retail media is fantastic due to some of the measurement capabilities that maybe we didn't have in store. But as we're seeing this shift of budgets to retail media networks, I would say we're also seeing like inflated ROAS numbers, right? If Coke goes and bids on Coke on Amazon, for example, it's going to show a $20 return on ad spend. But the question is, if someone typed in Coke on Amazon and clicked on a Coke ad, would they have purchased regardless of that ad? I think that's what incrementality is kind of being drilled down to in our space and the language we're speaking lately. And that's what we're going to dive into today is, you know, how do we break down whether or not that ROAS is driving top line sales growth? What is the difference in iROAS and ROAS? But before getting into that, you have an incredible history and background that makes you the perfect person to dive into this subject. You've been brand side, you've been SaaS side, still SaaS side, but in a slightly different format. So if you could just give us a quick rundown on your history in the space, that would be fantastic.
Sure. I've been in the space now, I guess, coming up on 10 years, which is
Not to
which
age you or anything, but you're a little bit older than I am.
but yeah, so I started my career at Procter and Gamble, and I feel like every single year I reflect on my career, I become more and more and more aware of how absolutely blessed and lucky I was to be able to start my career at a place like that. And so I spent my first 7.5 years of my career at P&G, counting an internship. And I was fortunate enough to work on businesses like the Walmart business, Meyer, CVS, Amazon. But then I also had the privilege to, we'll call it in the early days of true kind of dedication to working on e-commerce and omni-channel, kind of work on the forefront of strategy and long-term vision. What do we need? People, process, technology. What type of investments do we need to make now to set us up for the success in the future when e-commerce actually gets large enough to be an impact to the P&L. And so I spent 7 years at P&G, was in the sales function, customer business development, I think is what they called it when we first joined, which was a phenomenal place to begin. And I learned so much from so many brilliant minds. And then I was, lucky enough to be asked to start to really work on omni and e-commerce. And while there, I moved our retail media buying and strategy in-house. We were using an external, like, OG agency in the space. and they were doing a great job. It's just I felt like, we as a brand wanted to take a little bit of a chance to see if we could do that ourselves. And we knew we could bring the strategy in-house. The question was, could we bring the buying in-house as well? And so I built the in-house retail media team at P&G. And when I was doing that, I quickly realized that we needed a partner and a capability to help us do that work in the space. And so I led the RFP of ad tech partners. And so I saw everything that existed at that time and I settled on PackView. And I thought that it was the solution at that moment that gave us the best opportunity to deliver the strategies at the level of granularity that we really wanted to. And it was a phenomenal tool for us, and it was a very successful partnership that still exists today between those two companies. And then I don't know, maybe a year after first, becoming aware of these partners, I decided I wanted to join. And so I called Melissa one day and said, "Hey, I want to join the team." And we made that happen within like 3 days. And so then I spent 2 years or 2.5 years at PackView working on a variety of things, everything from some of the product strategy to running the global agency business and international growth. I worked with almost all of our biggest enterprise clients in the space in some capacity. And then I kind of had a growing desire to like do something new and attach myself to something that I thought was going to be, very, very, very important in the coming years. And that was measurement of retail media. And now I'm at Incremental, obviously. And it was the analogy I use is PackView was a rocket ship that had already kind of left the stratosphere. And I saw Incremental as a rocket ship that was still on the boosters and or still on the pad and the boosters just got lit. And so I joined the team almost 2 months ago now. So now I've been here for 2 months and it's been great so far.
Which is incredible. I mean, you joined as SVP of Revenue and Commerce Strategy, which is a great title for you. And I think everything you encompass. And one of the reasons you and I got connected was over LinkedIn. I think at your P&G days, we were still connected. And then we became friends through PackView. But why I was so excited to bring you on to the podcast is you understand the topic so well, but you can also speak it in a way that's incredibly eloquent. I think when you get into measurement, there's typically this divide of the people who understand measurement are usually not my type of people. Like I've built an audience because I can break things down in a relatively simple way. And I've had multiple calls where you have taken the time to just teach me things about the space, if we're being honest. So just want to give you a big shout out and very grateful for our friendship because I know you've added so much value in my life, whether it was at PackView or now at Incremental.
No, I appreciate it. And yeah, I do remember our first LinkedIn conversation. And honestly, you were one of the brightest and most innovative minds in the space. And working at somewhere like P&G, as large as that company is, one of the most valuable things you can do is find people in the space who are emerging and innovative and attach yourself to them and learn from them. And so I got a lot of funny internal questions on like, why are you talking to this tiny little agency? And I was like, well, because I think she's smarter than all of you. I want to learn. And so I do remember that. So then it's been great ever since.
And we're still here. I think we're talking about that next wave. So figuring out retail media in general has obviously been the struggle over the last 5 to 6 years. We're seeing the larger companies finally have the solutions in place, start building their internal teams that can speak that language. That's what I think you started. Now that next wave is making sure that the spend on the RMNs is actually valuable. It's driving net new sales. One, why do you think we're finally seeing this shift from, a ROAS focus to, okay, does that ROAS actually make a difference? Is a lower ROAS better if it's more incremental? What do you think's driving that shift in conversation?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. One, it is the natural growth and importance that this channel has become, right? And so for, large multinational CPGs, the objective is the same. It's volume, profit, and share growth. It's on everyone's scorecards. It's what they report to the street. And that share growth aspect of it is a math game, which is just, how fast do I think the category is going to grow? And therefore I need to grow a little bit faster than that. So I'm one larger piece of the pie than I was last year. And you do that math by channel. And back when Amazon, was growing at 30, 40, 50% CAGRs for a lot of these categories, the math simply said, if you don't win in this channel, you cannot win the overall share game. And so there was this huge influx of we have to win in this space. And the way to win in that space was to create that flywheel effect on Amazon. And so that has driven a ton of investment and resources into it. And now, obviously, Walmart and Instacart and Kroger and Target, et cetera, have all also blown up tremendously. And so now you have just this amount of focus and amount of resources that's now in this arena that is huge. And what comes with that is, well, is this actually moving the needle for us? Because it is substantial and it is a choice we've made to not invest in other areas and put money here. And so that's number one, is just big enough that people give a shit now. Number two is the fact that, there are just more people working on it and more functions and higher level people who are involved in some capacity. And when that happens, people start to ask questions, especially when you get, the finance team in a room or the analytics whose job at these companies is to ask that question, which is like, hey, are these investments that our commercial and brand teams making really moving the needle for our business? And should we, consider doing something else? And that's what people have started to really poke it on in the last 1 to 2 years, which is like, hey, I see what these platforms are telling me I'm getting back, but the math doesn't math. It just doesn't math. Like I spent $50 million on Amazon. They told me I got, 250 back or 200 back. My business didn't grow that much. And this is actually how I first started thinking about incrementality in retail media when I was at P&G. Was a finance manager of one of our business units. Him and I were getting a beer and he just nudged me and was like, hey, the math doesn't really work for this, right? And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, well, I was just looking at the reporting that came in and based on like the ROAS that came back, it was a lot. And he was like, this is phenomenal. But he was like, the total business really wasn't growing. So he was like, well, all right, then maybe we had some other issue, maybe merchandising we didn't do last year, or we lost distribution, organic, whatever it may be. And he was like, well, I held all that constant and the math just didn't math. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I don't have a better answer for that right now. And that's when we kind of sat down and first started trying to figure out how could we directionally do this thing. And I'm not a math person in any capacity. We were just trying to directionally feel better about what was coming out. And so that's where I think the industry has kind of got to now, which is, hey, we got to figure this out. And there's got to be a better way. And as more money will continue to funnel in, we have to have a solution to help us manage this in a more effective manner.
Yeah. The easiest, I think, most forthcoming problem I see when it comes to retail media spend is the branded versus non-branded conversation. You mentioned new to brand is not the best metric because, again, at the end of the day, it could be as simple as a customer switching their personal buying habits from in-store to .com and not actually being affected by your Amazon advertising, your Walmart advertising, or so on. Outside of that metric, new to brand and or branded search, non-branded search, what other KPIs do you see that brands are starting to adopt internally and make adjustments to if they don't have a tool like Incremental that's helping nudge them in that right direction?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And my answer is going to be relatively simple, which is at the end of the day, you have to start with sales, dollars and units. Like that is your endpoint you have to start with is I sold X.
Yeah.
And then therefore decomp down into why you sold X. And that's actually one of the things we think a lot of providers in the industry today that we'll get into in a little bit in terms of ROAS and whatever it is, like they're starting with the wrong endpoint. Like, starting with ROAS that we all agree collectively is not the right metric and is not accurate, and then trying to restate it and force it into a metric that is, well, don't do that. Like start with sales. And so I think most brands are just doing that math. They're saying, hey, at Amazon, I sold $10 million last year. And from that, I can confidently say 8.5 came from base, natural platform or category growth, merchandising activity, inventory swings up and down, whether that's positive or negative, competitive activity of X, whatever innovation that I launched. I can hold all of these things constant. And really, it's this last bucket of X that is media influence in some capacity. And that's really what we're starting with now to say, these are the sales that, to your earlier definition, that would not have happened if
Yeah.
we weren't leveraging media in this capacity. And that's what then the return metric should be based upon.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think brands are doing. It's not, revolutionary in any way. It's just saying, hey, you know, to be damned ROAS, to be damned attributable sales. I'm going to start with my actual total sales and see what I can,
Yeah.
attribute media to.
It's interesting because the smaller side, the mid-market side of the industry, native to Amazon brands have spoken the language of tacos for forever, which is
Yeah,
what is
yeah.
my ad spend on my total sales? And they use that as the metric because at the end of the day, there is a direct correlation between your retail media spend and your total sales the majority of the time. But the enterprise side of the industry doesn't necessarily speak that language. And it's typically here's your yearly budget and here's your ROAS. Like that's the target I'm getting 100% of the time. And when you're held to that kind of ROAS foundation, it makes it really difficult to focus more on incrementality because that's when you have to get into really deep budget distribution conversations and they don't quite understand that language. So it's almost a competitive advantage for the smaller brands to already be speaking that, even if they don't quite understand the incrementality side, they understand the ad spend to total sales correlation.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of benefits that an advantages small players or even mid-sized brands have versus enterprise in the space. The biggest one is just flexibility to like be
Yeah.
able to do things and not do things on a whim.
Yep.
Big brands can't move money around and can't move money between retailers and have JBP commitments that they have to meet and fair and equitable policy considerations. It's all these things. And so, yeah, I think, again, that's why when I was at P&G, I wanted to listen and learn from you as much as I could because, a lot of times these smaller to mid-sized players are the most innovative and are kind of at the forefront of doing things in a better way. And that doesn't mean that that better way works exactly for an enterprise brand because you manage those business in a different way. But I do think that there's a lot to be learned from, each part of the market back and forth for sure.
Yeah. There's obviously quite a few risks in continuing to focus solely on ROAS, decreasing share of shelf, and just having spend that's not working for you. The brands who are not transitioning to an iROAS mentality, where do you see them going? What are the biggest risks that they're going to run into in the next kind of 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, I think it's the biggest risk will continue to be growth. And especially in the Amazon channel, like your investment in media and doing that in an effective way has such a large effect on the actual
Yeah.
growth of your business that if you aren't doing that well, you're gonna be in a rough spot. And depending on what role Amazon is in your portfolio and what you need to deliver, that could be a very big problem or not as big of a problem as people would think it to be. Even in other channels, Walmart, Target, Kroger, et cetera, still extremely important. And you're trying to win in that space undoubtedly, but it's a little bit mitigated by, the overwhelming portion of the business is in store in those environments. If you think about Walmart, well, it's one of the most important factors in the Walmart relevancy score, in-store unit velocity. And so the better you do in a Walmart, the better you do tend to do online. And so I think it's just at this point, we've reached this level of maturation and these platforms aren't going to get any less competitive, especially as like non-endemics introduced into the fold and placements that you didn't have to compete with other people. You now have to compete with other people. And so your investments are going to continue to get significantly worse from a profitability perspective if you haven't figured out a way to truly drive incrementality. And if you just continue to lean on ROAS, which the big problem with ROAS is like all of these RMN measurements within their silos confuse coincidence with causality. And like that's the root cause of why ROAS and your total sales don't necessarily correlate together. Especially important when you're in very highly penetrated, mature categories with well-developed brands that people are purchasing you on a regular basis. That is, kind of tenfold in that environment. And so I think it's just we're at the next kind of third wave of the brands who figure out how to do this in a really good way, or find a partner that helps them do that, will be at a competitive advantage versus their peer sets, and will kind of take that next step and the maturation of this industry is in general.
Makes sense. So at Better Media, I think we somewhat handle the incrementality conversation, at least on Amazon, with really granular campaigns set up, a budget distribution strategy. And rather than focusing on true incrementality, we really focus on, what is a customer's path to purchase and what does it look like? We don't get into a lot of off platform analysis in terms of in store merchandising compared to whatever RMN we're on. There's a lot of different software providers. All of them seemed to create a solution and named it the exact same thing, which is kind of funny. They didn't even come with any creativity and branding, not to call anyone out, but it did make me laugh. ROAS is obviously the product and the solution everyone's pushing. For brands who haven't even started taking steps in the right direction, what do you think the path to understanding their incrementality is? And you can go as simple as, again, budget distribution, understanding a net new customer, to utilizing the software providers at hand, to having a true incremental solution like Incremental.
Yeah, I think the solutions who have come out with, iROAS, whatever it may be, I think first and foremost are directionally better than ROAS. Like it is better than nothing. The analogy I've come up with is you and I are hanging out in New York, and we know we have to get to the Pacific Ocean in San Diego. In the past, we didn't even have a compass, so we're like, how the hell do we get there? And these providers, iROAS metric at least gives us a compass that's like west, go west.
Go
Yeah.
west, young man.
And so while that will directionally get us in a better way, it can still be very ineffective, and it's not directions, it's not a math quest to how to get to San Diego. And so I think it is directionally better than nothing. I think it's facetious, and I would say this to all of them. I think it's facetious to call it incrementality because it's not. And the reason it's not is because what they have integrated from a data perspective and an input perspective is so limited that you aren't truly measuring incrementality in any capacity. Like if you're trying to answer incrementality for Tide on Amazon and you don't include data from any other platform or any other media channel, you aren't measuring incrementality for Tide because they do have consumers who buy it every day at Kroger and Walmart that buy it on Amazon, whatever it may be. You may be helping them do a little bit better of a job on Amazon, again, directionally better, but it's not incrementality. And that's kind of the stance that I had taken in the past at PackView, which is like, hey, our brands are asking us to fill a gap, which is there isn't a measurement provider in the space or a solution in the space who has figured out how to do measurement of incrementality in like the commerce media space well. And our brands were asking us to try to fill that void, rightfully so, which is why all these iROAS metrics have came out. They've kind of done that, but it's not incrementality. And I was like, let's call something else called impact or like adjustable, whatever it is.
I love impact. I'm gonna vote for that.
Yeah, I think it's the analogy that I've been using is like there's phenomenal tools who are trying to help in this space. You have, we'll call them ad tech and digital shelf providers. You have legacy MMM, econometric type providers, and all of those are really phenomenal tools, but they were built to do something different. And so what I've started calling them, they're steak spoons. Like a spoon's great. I use a spoon every day. I don't use a spoon to cut my steak because it wasn't designed to cut a steak. Now, could I,
maybe some Wagyu, and that's honestly the problem we're running into, in my opinion, is you have a bunch of Wagyu style enterprise brands who can ride the wave of their brand presence.
Yeah, exactly. And so such a unique time where there really wasn't providers in the space in the past that could do what these brands were asking their agencies partners to do. And therefore, people were trying to fill a gap that they necessarily shouldn't fill in many ways. And I think that's kind of where we are. And I think the industry will work itself out over the next 1 to 2 years, where as there are providers in the space now who can do this in a really effective way, I think you'll have brands and agencies ask some of their partners to, hey, let's refocus on what I need and be innovative on. And so again, I think it's directionally better than nothing. And I think they absolutely should have pushed in that direction. Now going forward, I don't know if that's quite the case.
Do you think that there will ever be a perfect solution to 100% tracking path to purchase?
Absolutely not. Like that's the other thing that I struggle with and in the industry is like there will never be anyone that solves world peace. Just won't. Like none of the people who would need to collaborate in the space to effectively be able to track Destaney across the entire universe of her shopping behavior and patterns will never happen. Amazon will never share enough data with Meta, will never share enough data with Walmart, will never share enough data with X and Y to like truly be able to follow every human, their path to purchase from you saw a commercial on TV to then an ad on TikTok, then to bought it and in a Walmart. So like it'll just never get to that point, but it doesn't have to, right? Like that's the thing is you can still assess the impact of all of your activity without having to have that level of granularity and detail. Now, obviously, that means it's not 1000%
Yeah.
accurate per day. And again, like starting with the endpoint of total sales is like a good step. But no, there won't ever be a time that someone has all of the data and all of the data providers have chosen to play nicely together to enable that solution, unfortunately.
Progress over perfection, 100%. And that progress is an ever changing endpoint, in my opinion, because of how quickly our industry changes, the new solutions being released. With that being said, let's talk a little bit about Incremental in itself. How is Incremental solving that gap in the space? What are the retail media networks they're pulling in? What is the merchandising efforts they're pulling in? How does Incremental get you one step closer?
Yeah, definitely. So there's two, fundamental challenges that most measurement providers have in trying to understand and accurately measure the space of, I'll call it commerce media. One is visibility, right? Like getting the data from all of these various places is not easy, right? Because again, for Tide, you should be looking at Amazon's media and its vendor central portals completely. But you also need to be looking at Walmart media and Luminate, Target, Roundel, Kroger, KPM, and 8451 Stratum. The list goes on and on. And you need to get all that data into the same place. Well, then we also know that what Tide's doing on TikTok, I don't know if they're playing on TikTok, but Google and Meta and whatever it may be, also has influence in these like retail channels. So getting all that data in one place is a wildly difficult and enormous task. That's the first part of that. Then to be able to pull that data together and create a data spine that you then can manipulate the data and effectively do math against the data is another giant hurdle that most people don't want to do. And that's why, transparently, a lot of models from like the traditional MMM world really struggle with granularity.
Yeah.
If we don't have that ability to like individualize campaigns and ASINs and
Yeah.
SKUs and then all of the individual features that need to be attached to them, it's a lot of work and it's not cheap to do that as well. And so getting all of that into one place is really difficult. Number two, and this is where the analogy of like steak spoon, et cetera, kind of comes into play, is like understanding the ever-changing conditions of commerce in relation to doing effective measurement can be understated in importance and value. So it's not a math problem. We have a really good math, and anyone is selling you new math is lying to you. Like the class regression model was invented in like 1996, and the dude that invented it actually didn't invent it. He just rediscovered the last. It was already created a long time ago. It's not really new math, and that's okay because we have good enough math to do this work. The challenge is getting all the data and the inputs in order to enable that math. But then secondly is to be able to facilitate those models to be able to see and understand the changing conditions of commerce. So an MMM model is great. Like it's really good math and it does a really good job at a really macro level of telling you why this happened in the past and what we think would happen in the future if nothing changed. And like things like population size and demographics and all these other things really don't change that much in a really fast time period. Your organic rank on laundry detergent on Amazon can go from 3 to 14 like that and do that 15 times within a day. And when you're assessing the incremental impact of your media, the credit you're giving your media when you have an item in organic rank 3 versus 15 is inherently very different. And that is inherently very different based on the category and the brand is in question. Tide, very developed, very mature. Everyone knows Tide. My grandma said for 50 years, like, if you're not using Tide, your clothes aren't clean. So, like, if my grandmother searched laundry detergent on Amazon, and it was in organic 3 versus organic 7, she's still buying Tide. That difference could be enormous in what value you would want to get to media. And so, all of these methodologies and all these models only update, at best every 6 months or at best every 3 months in like extreme cases. The problem with that is commerce changes every day. And so the answer that you're giving a brand in terms of how their media is performing and the value that it's having could differ really, really dramatically when price changes, when promo changes, when your organic position on a page changes, whatever that may be. And so what we've done is got all that data in one place. But then number two, the way we build our solution is we see and make an assumption for all of those different features: price, promo, inventory level, competitive presence, XXX. But then we also update that every day. So what happens is we make a series of short-term forecasts all the time. We say, here's what we think as of today, the value of all of these things are. Here's what we think is going to happen tomorrow. And then we get to the end of tomorrow and we look back and we say, well, were we right or were we wrong? And even if we right or were we wrong, did anything change? And so did price move? Did your organic rank change? And if so, our model can get smarter now and understand for that specific influence, what does that mean for that brand? And so then the model gets just a little bit smarter and then a little bit smarter and a little bit smarter. And it starts to really understand how all these changing conditions of commerce can truly impact the efficacy of media in that environment. And so that's what we've truly, built our solution to do, which is get all the data that you really need. But then second, set up the model for success in the commerce landscape and allow it to see and learn from the changing conditions that happen every day.
It's incredible. I mean, one, the first piece in itself, I think, has typically been reserved or accessible for larger companies who could afford to pull in all of the data they're looking for. But the second piece, I haven't even seen the large companies doing incredibly well, which is moving quick. So what you're doing is you're unlocking incrementality for everyone, in my opinion, not just the large enterprise companies that can afford to work with the historical top players in that space, but also how quickly you're moving and adjusting is almost, I think, shifting the game to the mid-sized market who can really, again, make adjustments based off that. Enterprise is always going to be at a challenge of efficiency and speed. But that mid-sized market can really adopt this early on. They have a chance to really make some big gains.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, anytime you can shorten the value chain from insight generation to activity is enormously valuable. And that's what we are, really, really working on right now. That's why we announced our partnership with Sky.
Yeah.
We're working on partnerships with other ad tech solutions that hopefully will be announced soon or hopefully will come to fruition. But in reality, what we want to enable is using our model and our methodology to create really, really phenomenal insights and recommendations, and then enable those in your buying platform, whatever that is, in the most automated and effective way possible. Again, back to like the challenges with some of the legacy measurement solutions that exist, speed and granularity. If an MMM model says, hey, Destaney, you should spend $40 million on Amazon, you're like, on what? And like, that doesn't really help. I'm like, great, but we have so many levels deeper to do that. And then if you get an output from an MMM model every 6 months, well, the world has changed entirely in this space. And so what has to happen for practitioners to be able to use effectively in this space is you have to have the level of granularity down to the campaign SKU or ASIN level. But then you also have to have the speed of output move from once every 6 months to ideally every single day, at most weekly. And so I think that gives everyone the opportunity now to go from insight to activity as fast as they want to. And that's what we're really focused on doing, is giving as granular as possible insights and recommendations at a daily grain, so then a media practitioner can actually leverage that in the way that you buy on these platforms.
Well, I have a feeling that we are going to need a part 2 and a part 3 of this podcast, if we're being honest, because this has been absolutely incredible. think there's a lot more we could dive into and go a little bit deeper on, but gonna have to wrap it up now. And I just want to say thank you so much for hopping on. We'll definitely make sure to share everything about Incremental, everything about Alex Juday, follow him on LinkedIn. And again, just thank you so much for taking the time to hop on and share everything you had to share today.
Of course, I appreciate you as always, and look forward to the next round. Seeing you soon, obviously as well.
Yes, amazing. Thank you so much.